Good afternoon, everybody. Hey, I'd like to welcome you to our talk today, which is entitled, Why Testing is Also a Developer's Problem. I'm Scott Erlanger. I'm the Director of Product Marketing of DevOps at Tricentis, and I'm joined here by Blake Reynolds, who's a Solution Architect of DevOps, also at Tricentis as well. And today we're going to talk a bit about, how testing fits into the software development process, and in particular, how, it's not just a testing problem, it's not just a developer's problem, but it's something that the entire development team needs to think about in order to get software out the door, both effectively and on time and with high quality. One of the things just to mention in particular, and I'm sure this is obvious to everybody here, Agile teams move fast. That's really the entire idea behind Agile in particular. Basically, every single sprint moves ahead. There's more features to do with every sprint. I mean, I'm sure that picture there looks pretty familiar. That's probably actually not even that complicated an Agile board for many people out here. And the next sprint, there's more features on it. And the one after that, there's going to be even more. And software's not getting any simpler either. You look at that go back. You look at that diagram in the middle, and it's getting more complicated. And the applications themselves, the architecture, that picture there, I think, is from Salesforce or something along those lines. And it already has so many boxes on there, and the software is getting even more complicated. But things aren't even slowing down as well. It's always accelerating. That loop there implies that things are going to go in a loop and continue iteration after iteration after iteration, and things are just going to be more features and over time as well. As Agile teams continue to move fast, things back up. And in particular, you find that each sprint, there's some amount that doesn't get done. You can see the picture there that shows sort of what looks like sticky notes on the board. You look at the second one there, this backlog keeps growing. So what didn't get finished during the last sprint is going to get moved towards the next sprint. And then overall, again, this makes more the next sprint. Overall, over time, things keep piling up. The amount of features that need to get delivered, the amount of testing that needs to get done as well. And the thing just to mention that's sort of an interesting picture here is that you look at the left there in the picture. Maintenance is a relatively small piece there, all right? Maintenance, we're going to say, includes testing. It includes fixing applications that break with tests. But over time, as you shift to the right there, maintenance becomes more and more and more until it's basically the largest component there of that particular sprint. And, so basically what could have been used for developing and delivering new features is now being used by maintenance. And that's not really essentially going to be driving the innovation that needs to be done as part of these applications and part of making the business successful. And eventually, things break, and innovation comes to a halt, and things slow down and stop as a result of this. And this has real impacts as well when you look at this. So releases get delayed. Releases are of poor quality, too. The testing that was needed wasn't able to be fit in within the sprints, and the applications go out the door without the necessary testing that was required there. And ultimately, this user experience leads to dissatisfaction customers and poor experience when using the application as well. And rightfully so, users have high expectations. You look at the graph right there as well, and you see stats such as 50% of users will delete an application if it consumes too much space or if it's buggy. 90% of users are concerned about application performance before buying. That seems kind of low. I would think every buyer is actually interested in an application's performance. And finally, 77% of orgs consider a bad user experience as a major reason behind application churn. So I mentioned before, ultimately people are going to churn and they're going to leave and they're going to look for a different application that provides a better user experience. That graph there at the bottom in particular is really interesting. It looks basically at the amount of delay in a mobile page loading versus the bounce rate. Just a 3-second delay, 32% more people are going to bounce. All the way up to 10 seconds. So if an application takes 10 more seconds to load, 123% more people are going to bounce. This is a huge factor in people leaving and moving towards another application as well. So you can see that having a high-quality user experience is particularly important when it comes to mobile applications. What I think is sort of an interesting discussion point here, too, is you look at Agile and DevOps. Both of these are essentially about speed and moving fast. Agile in particular speeds up the product development process. You're able to get out features and sprints, move faster, get more, better and more features out to the customer. DevOps more on the feature delivery process there. It's able to do the releases into production, be able to keep up with the speed of Agile. So you have this pipeline that actually starts at the development and moves to the software delivery, moving faster and more efficiently. But in order to keeping up with the speed and with this essentially momentum of Agile and DevOps, you also need testing to be able to keep up with that as well. You have to ensure that these features go out the door with high quality and are able to keep up with the speed of both of those. So I think the bottom line here is that you really can't have fast development without also having fast testing as well. And you look at this graph that I'm sure we all know so well about the software development and the DevOps, essentially the cycle here. Testing is a central part of that overall loop. If testing were to become a bottleneck, everything else would slow down as well. So you really need consistency across each of those stages to be able to ensure that software is able to make it out the door effectively and quickly. But what we're going to talk about specifically today is that test automation. What is the answer towards this bottleneck? How are you going to be able to get testing to keep up with the speed of development and software delivery? And that's test automation. And we're going to talk specifically about 3 key components of test automation. The first one is test authoring. And this is particularly the creation of the tests. How are you able to create tests more quickly, be able to create higher quality tests and do it in a way that's sustainable and able to keep up with the speed of development? The second piece is test execution. That's the running of the tests. If you have to, maintaining the infrastructure, being able to not have effective ability to execute tests where you need them on the different types of devices that you need to run them on can be a real bottleneck as well. And finally, test maintenance. You saw the graph that we showed earlier where the test maintenance was building up over time. Being able to reduce the amount of maintenance, being able to ensure that your tests are stable and come out with high quality is another key important piece of test automation. So first we're going to look a bit at test authoring. What's a common approach for testing in particular is manual testing. You have an application, you try it out on a physical device or on an emulator, the different capabilities that you're trying to test out. But this comes with several challenges. First of all, it's kind of slow. You need to be able to actually physically go in and try out the application, have a person who's available to actually run the test and run all the tests that you need in particular. It often can be low quality if you're not able to hit all the cases that you need, or you're not able to consistently hit the cases, depending on who's actually doing the testing as well. And you may not even actually be able to measure the coverage in those cases as well, just due to the sort of the manual nature of this as well. And of course, high effort. That's essentially the name of the game of what we're talking about here. Having people that are required to actively test these out in a manual sort of way is definitely an effort component as well. But it's worth noting that upwards of 60 to 80% of all testing is still manual, and there's other approaches here that are able to reduce some of these pain points that we hear. Another one that we're going to talk about as well is open source, solutions such as Appium or other type of open source solutions here. These, definitely provide automation. They provide the, scripting-based approaches for able to achieve this type of testing, but there's also some challenges they provide as well. First of all, test creation can be slow. You have to write the test using the scripting and create the code and test out the code, make sure it hits the cases that you're looking for as well. Also, you need to have the skills to be able to generate these tests. You need to be able to actually write the code to be able to produce them. And finally, you need to be able, again, they often have basic locators. And this gets back to that stability point that I mentioned before. Being able to find the elements in an application and make sure that they're there and that the application will work correctly is particularly important. And often those types of components may be a bit limited in these approaches here as well. Integration. Essentially, when you have test authoring through these type of approaches, you might have all the other components that you need. Whether this is integration as part of your other tools such as CI or such as your repositories, or integrations with your overall release pipelines, or even integrations as part of your test execution, having a place to run your tests and the infrastructure that you need. Those are all pieces that have to be part of a complete testing solution. And finally, support. What happens when you need a feature? What happens when things break and you have a bug fix to be done? These are all things that you have to really think about as part of your testing solution as well. We're going to talk more about this, and Blake's going to give a demo of this a bit later, but one thing we're going to talk about here in particular as part of this is Testim, which is a product that we make at Tricentis. And in particular, it's a low-coded solution in that, it has the ability to do most things without the use of code through what we're going to call a record and a replay type of interface there, but it also has some coding for the flexibility that when you need this type of power as well. And what we include as part of this, again, is that you're able to create tests really fast, and that's one of the real benefits here, to be able to speed up the test creation. You're able to integrate it with all the other cloud infrastructure that you're needed to run this as well. But we're going to talk more about it. You'll get to see that firsthand later on. As was mentioned, the second piece of test automation is test execution that we talked about. And this is how you have the flexibility to run the tests on the types of devices, where and when you need to run them as well. One thing just to mention about mobile testing and Android testing in particular is that it provides several unique challenges here. First of all, you have lots of different devices and configurations that you have to be able to generate on demand. You have to be able to run them and make sure that you get the coverage that you need. For example, whether it works on a Pixel device or whether it works on a Galaxy device is one thing. Whether it works on a phone that when you're talking in the city or when you're using it on top of a mountain, that's another different condition. Whether you're on the subway, on all the different types of features as well. Wi-Fi, cameras, 5G, battery life, security, all these come together and are part of each of these different phones, and each of these different permutations are really important in ensuring that your application is going to work always consistently, where and ever when it's needed as well. And one solution for testing, of course, is you can just build your own lab. You look at these pictures here; they get pretty complicated pretty quickly there, of all the different wires and all the different types of devices that you would need to maintain and to purchase and keep as part of your lab. And but so that's why we take different approaches here, right? You can have devices that are virtual devices, I'll call them. These include emulators for Android. You see the picture right there as well. Emulators are really useful. They basically allow you to run fast tests. You can reconfigure them. You can run them early as part of your development process. But the one problem, of course, with virtual devices is that they're not actually real devices. You don't really have cameras. You don't actually have 5G and Wi-Fi. These physical types of features that are present with the device itself are really what you tend to miss with virtual devices. And there's also, of course, testing using real physical devices as well. And one particular use of this that's particularly important is making sure you cover these through the tests that actually test out these required features, for these required functionalities for your application, in particular as part of later testing to make sure you get them through your specific focus tests on the way to production. We go back for 1 second. And in particular, you often will have a limited number. You won't have all the same amount of these physical devices as you would virtual devices, which is essentially all the devices that potentially exist. But these do provide the real-world conditions and also these hardware-software interactions that you can really only get by using an actual physical device. And the third component that we're going to talk about today is test maintenance. The ability to make sure that your tests keep working, even as your applications change. So, let's go through a scenario that maybe is pretty common to all of you and that maybe you've experienced in your work as well. So you update your application, right? You make some changes, you introduce new features, right? And it's good. I mean, this provides new capabilities that your customers are looking for. And then you run some tests on them. It's also good, making sure that these new applications continue to work, that the functionality does what you're looking for it to do. But finally, after this happens, you find it doesn't work. Your application failed. And there's many reasons when you make your application updates that it could cause it to fail as part of this overall process here. So keeping these tests working is certainly a big effort here. Different types of changes often lead to additional maintenance here, right? You might have written the test on one device and you try to run it on a different device. New application capabilities. You can see those two pictures there. It's the same application, but it doesn't look the same, and it no longer actually passes anymore. The resolution could be different between two different devices, the one where you created the test and the one where you're trying to play on, or something isn't compatible with what you were actually creating there as well. The configurations could be different. There's lots of different versions of Android that are out there. A test that was written for one might not actually work on the other, depending on the capabilities or how the test was actually constructed. And finally, you could have different things like aspect ratio. This one example there is actually the same device. It's a flip phone, a folding phone. The one on the left is when it's folded, and the one on the right is when it's expanded. And that could cause differences in terms of how the test actually works as well. And one of the capabilities that can actually help with this in particular is using AI. I mean, AI has lots of different, capabilities, and it's amazing actually what it does across lots of different industries here. AI in particular, it has value in being able to find elements in an application. So you can sort of see the picture there on the left. You see the boxes around the different elements there as well. And AI is able to find these, and it's able to find them specifically in difficult conditions where things might not be easily recognizable. And using these capabilities, it becomes possible to match these locator elements with actually what you know as part of the test. So even when the application changes, as you saw sort of in that picture on the last slide there, it's still able to find the elements, it's able to use them as part of the testing, and the test will continue to work even when the application changes. And one thing in particular is different types of locators, and using AI ML that's able to come together and really build a much more stable and much more robust application here. And as a result, the maintenance is going to go down because you no longer have to fix the test because the tests do continue to work. Stability goes up, up. And that whole component that we talked about earlier, where we saw that, as part of these tests failing, as part of, taking up more and more time as part of each and every single sprint, becomes less because there's nothing to fix because the test is no longer breaking. So I'd now like to hand this over to my colleague Blake here, who's going to actually show you some of these ideas in action using Test and Mobile, which incorporates many of these ideas to really help keep testing, keep up with development.
All right, thanks, Scott. All right, so today I am going to be showing Test and Mobile. So what we're going to be going through here is authoring, execution, and maintenance. So essentially in Testum, you're going to have access to create tests through a virtual mobile grid. So it's going to have zero footprint authoring. You're going to be able to spin up a device on the spot. So I come over here, I say, okay, let's start recording. And you're going to have the option to pick from the virtual mobile grid, or you can use a local device. And that's one that's either a emulator simulator that's on your local machine, or a device that's connected to your computer. So I'll come in here, I'll pick a device. So we have lots of different options in here. I'll pick a Pixel 7 in this case. OS version 13. I'll hit next, and then I come through here into my app library, and I pick the application that I want to use to author my test. So I'm going to go with version 4 of my demo application, come in here, select it, and then it's going to begin loading that application onto the device. So it's going to pull this directly from the cloud, and you're going to be able to author your test right here. So as I mentioned earlier, you're going to be able to author this on a physical device as well if you want, so you can hook a device up. All that you'd have to do is install an additional Tricentis mobile agent to do that. But in this case, what we're doing is we're pulling this directly from our virtual mobile grid. So if I come over here, I have no virtual devices or physical devices connected to my machine, but I am able to do that if I want to. So our device is loaded with the application, and now I'm able to come over here and interact with it. So in this case, it's a simple pet shop application. So I'll log in. So click on username. I'll type in my username. So in this case, I'll use John. I'll come over here, tap on my password, enter my password in here. And as you can see here, it is recording what we're doing. So it's grabbing thumbnails, but it's also taking screenshots of everything that we're doing. I'll click sign in. And then I'll come in here, and again, this is essentially an alternative to Appium that is low code, no code. So I'll come in here, I'll start adding things to my cart. So as opposed to having to go through and actually analyze the DOM, find locators to actually utilize to drive your test, I'm able to very quickly author this test by simply interacting with the application as I normally would. I can do things that are a little more advanced. So maybe I want to extract something out of the page. So I want to say extract value. So maybe I want to extract this value because I know I need to later utilize this. So this is going to extract this value from my page. It's going to assign it to a variable, and I can call this whatever I want. So in this case, maybe I'll call it total cost. Come over here, I'll proceed to payments. And then maybe I want to validate that that same cost was the same in my cart as it was in my checkout page. So I come over here, I come over to validate element text, I point, I click, and we notice that this is a hard-coded value here. So I can take this, I can replace that with that variable from earlier and replace it with total cost. From here, this is essentially the idea of how you would author a test in Testum Mobile. As opposed to filling out this entire page, though, I'll utilize a feature in Testum Mobile called shared groups. So I'll come over here and I'll say payment info screen. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to not finish this entire test because I've already filled this out previously. I don't need to do that. So I'll stop recording. I will come over here and I'm going to actually change out the application to an updated version. So I'll come in and I will select version 5 of the application where we've made some changes to this application. Now, I've run through this before. I know this particular part fails, so I'm going to come in and I'm going to actually override the timeout in this, and I'm going to change this to, let's say, 10 seconds as opposed to 45, just so we're not sitting here waiting on that. But we're going to play this back. It's going to change the application out, and then it's going to run the test on this new version. And as I mentioned earlier, it is capturing screenshots along the way. So I come in here, I can see exactly what I interacted with as I was creating the test. And once we actually have this playback, it's going to go through this and we'll be able to see a side-by-side comparison to notice any changes that have been made and maybe identify why there are failures within our application. Now, it is, of course, going to be generating errors along the way. So if we actually do encounter an error, it is going to generate that error. We can very easily, quickly tag that and log it into Jira. And in this case, again, like I've done this before. I know this is going to fail. I was expecting it to. And it's like, okay, well, where does the machine learning come into place, right? So in this case, it failed. But we have the ability to come in and actually adjust the threshold of our machine learning. So currently, we're using machine learning locators to identify this. We could use fallbacks, so like maybe we don't really trust the machine learning, or it's just not working for whatever reason. We can always go to fallback to where it's actually looking for what it observed in the DOM earlier. But in this case, I'm going to just adjust my threshold to low for the machine learning, giving it some more flexibility to still run this same test without having to actually go in and modify it. So I play it back from here, and it should now be able to go through this portion. So being able to adjust that threshold is super useful because, again, like currently it's saying, hey, this isn't close enough. I'm not sure we want to pass this. But you can very quickly go in and adjust the level of machine learning threshold for this. And then we'll go through this, and it's going to actually fill out this payment info screen, as I mentioned earlier. So I didn't have to author that earlier because I'd already done it in a previous test. So it speeds up test authoring in the sense that we don't have to go back through. We don't have to continually re-record this. It's going to be more or less a reusable component that you can record and then reuse later in different tests. All right, so our test is played back. We no longer have to really worry about maintenance as much. We can adjust thresholds. We can allow machine learning to adapt to these changes. And over time, Testim is going to learn more and more about different applications, your application included. It's going to make adjustments to these tests as needed. So essentially, instead of having to go through and probably spend around 30 to 40% of your time on maintaining your tests, it's going to handle that for you. Now, again, if you don't like the machine learning mode, you can always use fallback locators. These do have some more flexibility, so I could switch this. You can then come in, you can deselect things, like maybe you know this text right here is going to change every time you run through this application. You could deselect it. It won't even look for that when it's trying to identify this element. You could pass data in from a data set through this as a parameter. If you need to data drive in any capacity, you are able to do that in these tests. So I know a very common use case is having to go through different data sets. You can use an Excel, JSON, CSV file to upload data sets and then data drive your tests. But essentially, it is very, very easy to go through and author and execute these tests. Now, this was, of course, only locally, so I mean, nothing really particularly useful about that. It's great. You can see it locally playing back. But if we want to come in and execute this on a schedule, or if we want to execute this as part of our CI pipeline, we can come in, we could use something like GitHub Actions or Jenkins or whatever the case may be, whatever your company is using as their CI tool, and you can actually make this as part of your pipeline. So I can come in here, again, I'm just going to use the built-in scheduler for this case. What you can do is you can come in, you can set a scheduler. In this case, maybe I'll call this, let's say, droidcon. And then you can pick like the time these are executing, which days of the week they're executing. You can pick which grid you want to use to execute these on. So in our case, we can use the virtual mobile grid, same devices that we had available to us to author on, but we could of course also use our physical device cloud, as well as other third-party ones like BrowserStack and Sauce Labs. So if you already have one that you're kind of attached to or using in other parts of the organization, you can use BrowserStack or Sauce Labs or Headspin as an option to execute on. You can select the grid, you can select which branch. So Testim does offer branching. So if you need to create a new branch, modify your tests on, make sure they work, and then merge them back into your main branch, you are able to do that. And then you can also get a notification once these have gone through. You can get a notification either on every failure, the first failure, or kind of a summary at the end of the run to show you what has passed, what has failed. And then you're able to dive into your failures a little bit more. And you can get these either emailed or Slack to you. Other things you can do, so let's say that you want to override the default configuration. So it's great that you can author it on one device, but what if you wanted to play it back on another? So you can come in, like again, we'll pick like the virtual mobile grid. And then I can come in here and I can either select a different device, or I could say, okay, I want to be able to play this back on any device that equals like a certain rule set. So like maybe we want to play this back on version 12. And instead of like the Google Pixel devices, like maybe I want to use Samsung. So I can narrow this down to a smaller subset of like version 12.0 on a Samsung device, and then play it back on that, and ideally expect the same results no matter which kind of device you authored this on. We can also do this in parallel. So I mean, if you needed to come in and you needed to run these tests, maybe like 4, 5, 6, 7 tests at a time, you're able to do that. Or you can run them serially if needed. Other thing you can do, so like let's say you have a production version of the app, a staging version, a QA version, a UAT version. You can override the environment you want to test this against and plug in the new version or the old version of an application or just the different environment version of an application that you want to run these previously authored sets of tests against. And as far as taking a look at our mobile app library, you can come in, it's very easy. You can either use our API to upload your application. So maybe you've built it, you want to like automatically have it upload into our system. You can use our API to upload the application, or you can simply build it, drag and drop the APK into our system, and then select it whenever you're authoring your tests, executing your tests, whatever the case may be. And then you can come in here to our device grid, so you can see the different devices that are available to author on, as well as play back on. And then you can see the real devices. If you go that route and you want to execute these on real devices, you can see what is available to you as a real device. And reasons you might want to go for a real device versus a virtual device, we'll be getting metrics back. Like maybe you want to see your application's use in the real world, like how much battery drain is there, how much memory is being used. If there's any kind of like network throttling that needs to be done, you might need to throttle the network on a real device to see like what situation your users would encounter. Maybe you want to see like if there are any janky frame rates on a real device and get metrics back on that. That would be when you'd want to use a real device versus a virtual device. And then once we've gone through this, we can of course see our insights. So custom dashboard. I'm going to pull up our main project. My small project doesn't have a ton of data in it, so I'll go over to main project. Take a look at this, and again, you'll see your results. So you've got your passes, your failures. So there's some nice reporting built in. You can take a look and see your specific test runs, see why things failed. You can tag those in Jira. Makes it very, very easy to do. Create a quick Jira ticket. You also have test statuses in here. So if you wanted to create your test, it'll start out in draft mode, and then you can place it in either evaluating or active. Primary place this impacts is if you're using this as part of a CI pipeline. So if you wanted to use this as part of a CI pipeline, place it into evaluating. If your test fails, it would not fail your build. But if you wanted it to fail your build, you can come in, you can set this to active, and then if this fails, it would fail your build. And quarantine, of course, is just like commenting it out, like it just doesn't run that particular test. There's some reporting built in, so if I wanted to expand this out, take a look at like my success rate over the past X amount of time. So in this case, like 3 months, you can see our percentage of tests passed, like 45,000 out of 47,000. Number of unique tests that you're running over that period of time, the average duration of your tests. Generally, best practice would be to build smaller, more modular tests, just because the longer it is, the more complex it is, the more places it can fail at. And ideally, you'd want to be able to maintain and update these tests much more rapidly than having to go through a 10-minute, 15-minute test as needed. And that is really more or less what I would show. We do integrate typically with any CI tool. So if I wanted to come in, and again, I was using like Azure Pipelines or GitHub Actions, like you can come in, get a pre-configured YAML file. You'll be able to run these tests on essentially any CI tool, but you can further configure this based on what it's done. So currently we're saying whenever we make a code commit, we want to execute this set of tests. It will do this based on the specifications we have down here. Currently, it's just executing everything in the project, but you can further specify this based on the branch it's in, based on the labels that you've assigned to your tests, based on the test suite that it's in, based on the plan that it's part of, and which version of the application it is. So lots of different configurability here, but generally this is what we would like to consider a smarter alternative to something like Appium that's going to require a lot of time to not only author, but also to maintain for your tests. Great. And that is Testa Mobile.
Yeah, it's good. Full screen. All right. So again, we started off by talking about sort of why testing is important as part of the overall development process. And hopefully we made that clear and gave some good examples here of how testing can be sped up in order to be able to keep up with the development pace of Agile and of DevOps here. But there's some interesting stats here I wanted to show, just to kind of bring this into reality as well. And these were some studies that were done recently by Forrester as well. And one thing that we found, again, is that 54% of organizations struggle to keep up with customer demands. I mean, I'm sure that you've seen this before, too. The feature requests come in, the bug fixes come in, and it's always hard to fit those into the sprints along with new innovations that you're trying to complete as part of your roadmap as well. Quality can suffer when, essentially development and delivery, when fast development and delivery is prioritized. When you're trying to move fast, sometimes you have to sacrifice somewhere, and people often will choose quality as well, which leads to these problems in production that we had talked about before. And upwards of 50% of companies have lost revenue due to poor customer experiences, which seems kind of low to me actually as well when you looked at sort of how that latency leads to a churn rate in terms of mobile applications here. But ultimately, just looking at this data here from this Forrester study, you can see that, the poor quality experience due to the fact that, to be able to fit all the testing that's needed as part of your sprints really actually does have an actual business impact here as well. And I think the bottom line, the key takeaway as part of this is that testing really is something that impacts the entire development team. It's not just testers, it's not just developers, it's everybody. When you're not able to release quality applications or when you slow down your application releases, it impacts your business, it impacts your customers, it impacts the overall quality experience of using your product as well. And I think most importantly, it really impacts your team's ability to drive innovations and get out the capabilities that really separate you from everybody else and make a difference in terms of the quality and the types of features that are in the products that are delivered. And, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. Again, that QR code that you see there, if you scan that will take you to find some more information about some of the ideas that we talked about today. You can definitely come and visit us in our booth down there on the first floor. You see a live demo of Testim that Blake showed earlier and talk to us about your testing needs and your testing challenges as well. We're here at Tricentis to help you release high quality products. Thank you.